it's good versus evil, and you think you're picking the right side. You're picking the side that you're emotionally connected to. Doesn't make it right.
For all of us.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Get Lit podcast, where faith, family, finance, and fitness come together, leading through the 4 F-bombs. I'm Shane Beckham.
And I'm Mike Huff. And today we're going to just chat, Shane and I. We've got some things on our mind that we want to talk about. State of the world's in a bad place. And so we just want to chat about, what does right look like and what is our role in society to try to drive us there? Shane, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, these past few weeks, if anything, on top of a lot of things, but these past few weeks in the world that we live in have obviously, unless your head's in a hole somewhere, you've been exposed to a lot of different emotions and things, and it's almost like anytime there's an event that can be classified as, I won't say catastrophic, but you go back to 9/11, all this things that have been happening are kind of around that same memory. And you and I are old enough that we have very, very high visual memory of 9/11. It's oddly, there's a lot of the generation below us that have, they don't know what that felt like. And it makes you take a step back. And some of the things that I was thinking about, when we came up with the idea to just kind of riff a little bit, was perspective is a very, very unique way to look at clarity. If you want to tie those two words together, like, everybody can have a different perspective on the outcome of events. But to your point, you're not doing some offline talking. Are you clear on what you really believe and why you believe it? Because there's an outstanding difference between humanity about what is right or wrong, but everyone's entitled to their own opinions. Everyone's entitled to their own thoughts. However, when we cross over into a world to where it's no longer safe to admit those by any circumstance, then I feel like we've started breaching some serious personal protocols, which just makes you reflect and get a little bit different perspective on life. And that's kind of where I've been these past few weeks. Is just kind of taking a step back, and I'm like, at the end of the day, I have my health. My kids have their health. My family has their health. There's a lot worse off people than me in this world. And it kind of just, the shocking events can make you think and appreciate what you have, because these little problems that we have, we all have them. When you take a step back and peel the onion back, how much do they really matter? How much does that really matter at the end of the day? And that's kind of some of the things that I've thought about recently, is trying to be more grateful for the opportunities and the things that I currently have, even though it's a struggle to sometimes, keep it all afloat. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you're talking about how do you separate yourself from the current events and try to think about the things that are at home, I'm usually really good at that. I'm usually fine. I can live in my world and see what goes on in everybody else's world. And I can take that information, help me inform my world, but I don't internalize it, and it doesn't feel personal to me. It's different this time for some reason. These last couple of weeks, it's been really challenging not to take the events and feel them. And that's good. I should be feeling more of these things so I can make better decisions. But it's been, what you say makes perfect sense. And so what I'm trying to do with all the information I'm gathering is gather information, right? And that's where I think a lot of us are just going wrong, man. We're reading the quip, we're seeing the headline, and if it's my party saying the quip, then I believe it wholeheartedly. I don't have to investigate it. That's what we're doing to ourselves. And if it's the other party saying it, then it's got to be wrong, right? And so this division, it's perspective. Whatever your perspective is, if you don't choose to try to look at it from the other side, you're never going to know what truth is. And it's hard to find truth today, right, Shane? I mean, you gotta be willing to read every source possible. You got to be willing to read the sources you hate in order to try to find the triangularity to truth, so you can have real clarity. Because if you got wrong perspective on a thing that you think you're super clear about, you aren't clear. You are slanted.
Yeah, just take social media for granted. Obviously, we use social media platforms to promote our stuff. It's a necessary thing, but you get into some slippery slopes there, because everything can be. It's not propaganda, but is it? If
You know,
you
I
really
don't. Yeah, it's one of those funny things, man. I don't know that there's. I'm just not a believer that there's this conspiracy, that there's this big conspiracy. I believe that there is a mindset of groups of people, whether it be left or right. There's a mindset, and then that creates propaganda. Not that there's somebody else trying to change, trying to create propaganda. People really believe what they say. And then it gets propagated and propagated and propagated, twisted and tightened. And so you take a 5 minute speech and you boil it down to 3 words. And those 3 words
right.
mean whatever you want them to mean in the context.
Yeah, and it's take a lot of things are taken out of context. People can pull whatever they want out of a sentence and reframe it to make it mean whatever it is. And that I try to teach, the people that are in my life, you have to take the 30,000-foot approach. I had a conversation with the coach yesterday, and some of the conversation was taking sides. Like, I feel like maybe you're taking this side. I said, I'm not taking anybody's side. I try to look at it through your lens, and I try to look at it through their lens. And then I try to objectively see the big picture here of what's going on. And although you may not like my answer, I probably know a lot more information than you do about the situation, which gives me the clarity to make the decisions that I make. Now it's a question of, what amount of that do I need to share with someone, because that's not anybody else's real business. But, just having that granular perspective of, the reality is, if you take it to the next level, the act of violence can never be the answer for anything.
That's exactly right. Never. I don't care
No
what.
matter what your position is. I mean, that is the ultimate sin. And that can be broken way down, not even talking about physical violence, emotional, verbal, not violence, but just abuse. Like, it's the snowball gets to rolling, man, and it's like it just gets out of control. And there's never, the analogy that I'll tie into that, Mike, is it's like the domino analogy I use in the gym. It's the dominoes are going to fall one way or the other, but who has control of that? If you ever played dominoes as a kid, not the actual game, but you set them up to knock them down, so because it was cool,
So much fun.
you, you take one domino out and it stops. And there's such correlation to that. The anger, the hatred, the all the things that we feel towards these random things. If you just take a step back and say, is this really what I need to be wasting my time and energy on?
Well, that's the reason we wanted to have this discussion together today because we're trying to pull a domino out. The direction we're headed as a society, those dominoes are lined up to destruction. We're lined up to, I don't know, civil war. I don't know what's going to be the outcome. But the way we're headed and the hatred we have for each other as a species is I would say unprecedented. I guess it is. It's happened in the past. It's unprecedented in recent times. And as you said, it's 92% driven by that little phone in our pocket, that little
Yeah.
constant trickle of information that just feeds that beast, man. And we got to pull that domino out. We got to get our humanity back.
Yeah, I'm not real sure how. I'm not sure how that looks, how that works, just because it's constant division depending on what source you're looking at, what news outlet you're watching. Everybody has their own, and I do believe you're right in your theory. I do believe that everyone is convicted and truly believes what they are saying.
Yes.
The problem is they've got their earmuffs on. They're unwilling to listen to any other opinion. And I just feel like that's where there's some disconnect now. It seems to be when I was younger growing up, there was willingness to debate things, and there wasn't such just, if you don't believe with me, I'm going to punch you in the face. That I think a lot of this ties back to, Mike, the desensitization of violence through social media.
I think that's true as well.
It's one thing to watch a movie that's pretend. Whether or not that impacts or helps or makes things worse, I don't know. But when we all can pick our phones up and literally watch someone get murdered, and just go to the next clip, that's a problem. That's not good.
Well, it affected me greatly to see a couple of murders. We all know about the Charlie Kirk murder. We know about the young lady. I'm sorry, I don't know her name. That was murdered on the subway train. In that video, why are we releasing these videos to the public? Why would we ever do that? What's the value? It's traumatizing, and it creates this animalistic response inside of us. And we need to stop doing this stuff as a society. We need to start thinking about each other as human beings again. And it's funny. One side of the aisle blames the other side of the aisle for never thinking about anyone else as human beings, and yet they'll attack them personally the second they have an opinion. I just don't understand. It's we've talked about this a million times. It's where you're living in your emotional
Yeah.
bands, and it just feels like everyone's living in the red. Everyone, and if you stay there, we know nothing good comes from that.
No good ever comes from the red, Mike. And again, that's one of the things that I tell you often I struggle with. It's just, not right, wrong, or indifferent or any political view, whatever. It's my life. It's how I react to my own personal life emotion. I have a problem with keeping my emotions in check, really every day. I have tried and I work on it, I relentlessly, but that's one of my major things that I have to improve in my life is my emotional response because I don't know why, but I am just very geared towards to be an aggressor if I feel threatened or attacked in anything, and I take context wrong sometimes, and it's just I want to be, it just makes me want to not attack, but I'm going to say, you know, I'm in control here, and I feel like there's not just me in this world anymore. It's like there's just so much of that. And then next thing you know, one word, two words, three words, and it's an all out brawl. And the Bible says, I can't remember, and I shouldn't bring this up because I can never remember exact verses,
You did your best. It's okay.
but it talks about the tongue as a sword, and I believe that. The human ears and the human heart are tied together,
Yeah.
and whether we want to believe it or not, it's amazing the power of a word and how someone will hold on to that with such either hurt or anger or happiness, whatever the emotion is, but it's attached. And I think people forget you can't unsay something. You can't unwrite something. It's there forever. For if you put it out on social media, it's there forever. And one mistake that a young person can make is being in an emotional moment, not just a young person, any human adult or child or whatever. And when you get into the heat of that social media frenzy, it can charge you. The dopamine effect is real, man. You can get worked up one way or the other. And you may see a post that is out there and you should stay far away from it. Next thing you know, you've shared it and made your own comments. It only takes once, man, and you're flagged, and it can burn a lot of bridges. Like you and I talked about it. Like we have our opinions about things, but as a business owner and as a high level executive, we have to be very cautious on what stances we take. And it's not because we're afraid to speak our minds. Things can get twisted quickly, and we don't want to put ourselves in that position. And I feel like people need to recognize that no matter where they are in their life, that's a real thing. Like it's good versus evil, and you think you're picking the right side. You're picking the side that you're emotionally connected to. Doesn't make it right.
For all of us. It's thinking about two things. One is an observation. Observation one is it used to be that as folks got older, they got wiser and their emotions got more muted and they did things more through information because they learned that the first bit of information they get isn't always right. Yeah, I don't see it anymore. It doesn't matter what age you are now. Certainly, young people have more energy, more passion. They feel like they're going to solve the world, and they've got these just causes, and so there's more emotion that comes out of them. But man, older people are doing the same stuff now, and that didn't used to be the case. Just an observation. Could be wrong. It's not empirical. It's just an observation.
No, I agree with that.
And the second thing is man. By the way, awesome job by yourself last week doing a solo podcast while I was out gallivanting. But for the audience that doesn't know where I was in Alaska with Michelle, and we got a chance to go to this place called Brooks Lodge. I've been a couple of different places, some really awesome stuff. You check my Facebook feed, and Michelle Sturr posts some pictures. Amazing to be hanging with these grizzlies at Brooks Lodge. But what was the best part about that? It was 4 days in the middle of nowhere with zero connection to the outside world. I didn't know about any of this stuff until I popped back into a little town called King Salmon on our way back to Anchorage, and I suddenly had Wi-Fi, and I hadn't seen any work emails for a couple of days, which made me quite anxious. So I needed to open those up to see what was going on. But instead, I got flooded with this other stuff that just made me not want to come back to society. You're out there at Brooks Lodge, and what's cool about it is it's a lottery system to get into the lodge. There's only, I think, 12 rooms. There might have been 16 rooms, can't recall. Took us like 3 years trying to get into this thing. And so we got it. It was amazing. Had great dialogue with great people from all over the world around a fire every night after we're out looking at bears and fishing and what have you. And I couldn't tell a political stripe of any one of those human beings. I was so happy for it. I was so lucky to not know, because we weren't talking about world events. We were talking about nature and our lives and why we like to travel. And we just had humanity around that table. And then you come back to society, the first thing that blows up on your 7x2 is horrendous, horrendous.
Yeah.
And man, yeah, we've talked about it since then. Wouldn't it be great just to move our butts out there somehow?
Yeah, I guarantee it, man. You bring up a valid point to me, and growing up in the country and loving the outdoors, and we don't do enough of that anymore. I don't. I get too locked into the rat race, and with these cell phones, you work 24 hours a day if you choose to. It's it's sad in its own way that we become prisoners to our devices. We just have, and there's no solution for that. That's not going away. I think there's hopefully and eventually a shift to move kind of away from that stuff and get back out in the real world. But it's affecting generations of our society now. My son's age and the way that his group behaves is radically different than what I and you and I did. And what's to follow that? How does this progression continue? If we're already seeing such levels of desensitizing of violence occur now, what's that look like in 10 years? Like you said it before, we are entering into some unprecedented times. Now, there's always been protests and stuff like that. I mean, hell, look back through the news, but it just was never sensationalized like things are now. It was recorded in history. It was in a newspaper somewhere, and then everybody went on about their lives. You threw the newspaper away, you recycled it. You didn't continue to absorb that same shit
Yeah.
over and over and over again. Because you get on your phone today, depending on what your algorithm is and who you follow, those feeds they're not stopping for a while now. And it's just a dangerous thing. So I was glad you was able to disconnect. I tell you, I enjoyed doing the podcast. However, for those that know, Mike does a lot of wonderful work for us as far as getting the podcast ready and getting it posted and all the things. And man, I rode the struggle bus. It took me like 48 hours and I still couldn't get crap to work the way I wanted to, but eventually got it up. But yeah, it was a good, but definitely have a lot to learn there. But I miss being able to get lost in nature like I used to because you made a good point. It reminds me as a leader, I have to get better processes in place to where if I need to take a 2 or 3 day sabbatical, I'm able to. And yes, there's the anxiety that comes with that, but that you have a very capable team to handle things if you're away, and that eases that burden. I think too many people are unwilling to do that anymore. They're like, well, I can't take this time off from my job. I'll be buried. And we just don't take a lot of times for ourselves anymore. We just really don't.
Yeah, and my team, they of course, they don't need me around at all. Some days they probably wish I was. So it's,
Right.
but really about my own personal feeling of what am I not contributing that I should be. That's really what drives that anxiety for me now. Like, is somebody waiting on an answer and something that's really important that's time sensitive, and I've now been off the grid. Made sure everyone was aware. Checked in with them the second I was leaving coverage to make sure there's nothing hanging. Second I got back in and said, "What are you waiting on? How can I help you?" But the anxiety was mine about who I wasn't serving, not so much that they couldn't do it.
Sure,
Uh,
sure, sure.
in the problem that we were facing today is this division. And the last time we had a division like this, we always had levels of division in the country. But last time we had a level of division, uh, way worse than where we are now, but certainly feels like we're trending that way. Is the Civil War. The Civil War is fought over human rights and treating people humanely. And I think the problem is that that was clear. One side wanted ownership of people, and one side wanted people to be treated properly. It was clear who was morally right, morally wrong in that case.
Right.
It's not clear who's morally right, morally wrong in this case. Everyone absolutely believes they're morally right. That was an argument of morals. That was an argument of commerce. It was an argument of morals, but the other side was arguing commerce over morals. This case is not arguing commerce over morals. It's morals over morals. And man, I don't know how you reconcile that. That's what really scares me on this one, Shane.
Well, it's not just that. It's, well, I got to be cautious here. There's just an alarming trend that I see. And again, this is what I see. I've not done a ton of research. So I want to be very cautious how I frame this. What we consider to be leaders of our children, teachers of our children, prominent politicians, people that should have public trust. I guess that's where I'm headed with that statement. People that are held in that regard are anyone that teaches a youngster all the way through college, in my opinion, needs to be very cautious, like you and I are, about how they present their views on situations. Because these are the people that we need to be looking at as the example. And I feel like there's so many people in the position of leadership now that you can't look at that way. So you don't know whether or not who to trust anything out of anyone's mouth anymore, because who knows what someone's really believes or what they don't. And it's, to your point, it's muddled. It's muddy water. And then it just creates this anxiety storm. And you're like, how is this even possible? How many times do you catch yourself saying that? Like, how is that even possible? That's disturbing. We've got kids in this world, and God willing, eventually they'll have kids in this world. And you think, my God, look at how much the world, I'm 49. Look at how much the world has changed in almost 50 years. Think about 50 years ago, what the country looked like. The roads were still dirt where I lived, man. There was no technology. You had a house phone. And it's just the shift of this mentality. And you're exactly right. It all boils down to the inventions of technology that have driven a lot of these things. And they were never invented to do such. But now it's just, and you got, not just that. Now you've got however many millions of people are geniuses because they got Chat GPT.
Yeah.
How many people are even actually studying in college anymore that that are preparing to be the next leaders of our generation? There's a cheat code for everything, man. I told you, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I was a benefactor of and tested this theory in some college courses. And I said, Mike, I didn't even have to do any of this work if I chose not to. And it was never detected. That's dangerous. So, I mean, just tying all of the new ways that this world lives, and you go and you look at these people's captions, I'm like, there's no way in hell they wrote that. You know?
You know what's funny is you can see it if you're looking for it.
Oh, yeah.
Of quote unquote influencers on LinkedIn who write these leadership articles. They haven't written a word of that. You right through it. You're like, man, crazy.
So
But I want to go back to what you said because I want to label it. And it's this idea that those who have influence have responsibility, and it's a duty of impartiality. It's a duty of impartiality, specifically if you're an educator, right? I don't want to. I don't want to just bash educators. A lot of great teachers that really supported me, where I am in life.
Sure.
But the world's a little different now. But if you're an educator, your job is to help people critically think. That's really what you're teaching. You might be teaching a topic of arithmetic or whatever, but your job is really to help people learn how to critically think. And if you're not having a duty of impartiality, you're not sponsoring open discussion and open dialogue to think differently. You are just indoctrinating. And I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. It's totally inappropriate and it's careless. I like what you
I
said.
agree. Yeah, I agree. It is a responsibility. The same thing, pressure is a privilege. Pressure is a privilege. Diamonds, you know how they're made. They're made from pressure. And the pressure to have the cognizance and a mental ability to know where the line is as a responsible influencer, whether that's an educator or a leader of any fashion, it is your responsibility to know where that line of demarcation is at and to stay away from it. Because to your point, it's it's the amount of respect that you should have for everyone in your flock. And if you don't, it's just like we said earlier, you can't unsay something. You can't unwrite, you can't unspeak. And then once you do it, whether you regret it or not, it's just an opinion. Well, you know what, Mike? Sometimes opinions are better kept to your damn self, right? I think people need to go back to realize that I don't care about everybody else's opinion. I damn sure don't bother me. Keep it to yourself if you think it's going to create a problem. Do the do the test that we did earlier, like the email rule or the text rule. Like if you're in a high state of emotion, put your phone down and walk away before you make that post, before you send that email, before you send the text. But if we're back on the social media, put your phone down and walk away from it and come back and pick it up. And I've done this with stories before that probably were something that I was on that riding that high emotion from social media, and I put it in my story, and I was like, I'm not sure how this looks coming from me. And I put my phone down and I walked away and I come back and I thought, oh my God, thank God I didn't post that to my story.
Well, and again, it's the one-sidedness of everything. We've talked about Charlie Kirk and the young lady on the train, but also Melissa Hortman, which interestingly enough, that was a Democrat murdered in her house by a whack job, and it was it was barely even observed by
It's,
the current political reality. It doesn't matter. This whole idea that violence is going to solve anything. I wonder what's in these guys' minds. I don't know if they're insane. They have to be somewhat nuts to even start to do these things. But what's in their mind? Like, you think you're going to get away with this? Like, how are you going to live the rest of your life? But what do you and what did you accomplish? What did you do? What did you actually do?
yeah. And it's in today's world to think that you can pull something like that off and not have a camera or be seen or and someone find you is lunacy.
Yeah, I
It
guess
is, it is,
so whacked out on the idea of the moment, or maybe it's the thrill of the notoriety that that gets that thought that they're going to get busted just gets outweighed by that emotion, which is that's what we're talking about, man. When you're riding in that red, you will make bad decisions all the time.
can't,
Irrational.
yeah, you can't ride the red train, man. You got to find a way off of it quick. And again, and I admittedly, not to be a broken record, that's like I said, if I was to give you my biggest flaw, that's mine. I lean red more than I should. And, we all have our own flaws, but that's my biggest one. And it's constant work that I try to do. Like it's not that I'm willing to say this is just who I am. It's a problem that I recognize and say, I've got to find ways to get off this red train. Is it going to the wilderness for a hike? Making time to do that, to step away. You and I talk about work a lot, and I work too much, but I'm building something which I feel like at this point requires it. But at the same time, I'll take a step back and say, okay, out of the 10 things you just did, how much could you give to someone else truly? And I feel like for me, Mike, that's where the problem lies is figuring out, okay, the delegation and the systems and the processes to eliminate some of that to where you can free up a little breath work. Like you and I both talked about the guilt. Like no one should ever feel guilty for not working 20 hours a day. That's a problem, which leads to red because you're tired, you're on edge, you're stressed. So one word from a spouse, a child, a coworker can just detonate because you're walking on red. You're not giving yourself enough grace and time to step away from things. And it's not just me. You take a look around at the people in this world that work now nonstop via email. Nobody's taking a reset anymore. And there's something to be said about hard work, but there's also something to be said about being stupid.
Yeah.
I tend to ride that line pretty heavy when it comes to my workload. And it's like you and I've said before, it affects me. It affects my relationships. It affects my family. So you have to be cognizant of that. And I feel like that's the same thing we're talking about now is people need to realize what triggers them. You tie it all back to atomic habits. What is the environmental cue that triggers me to have this stance? What is the environmental cue that triggers me to get so angry about a post or what someone believes in? Because if you don't find the root of the problem, you're pissing in the wind. You're just going to continue to ride that train until something bad happens. You add in some beers, add in some alcohol. What happens then? Those inhibitions go down. I'll show you. Pow. Whoops. Can't unsend that text. So just being cognizant of your own personal thoughts and abilities, Mike, to help you be a better person is something that I try to do every single day. I fail a lot, but then there's some days I win. It's just checks and balances. But if you're not making the effort to listen to podcasts, to read the books, to do the things that you and I talk about, to hire coaches to come in and help guide you, but understanding that coaches, they still have their own shit. You and I have our own shit, but we take practical steps every day of our life to make us better in what we're weak in. And to me, Mike, I'll give you this example about health and fitness. Okay. And I want to save this for an episode, but I'm going to give you a little teaser. I've changed my perspective recently on how I think about health and fitness. All right. Let's say this is where you are and this is where you want to be. Okay. And if where you want to be is a 10, and you know that is the best feeling that you ever have, right? This should be invaluable to you, correct? Priceless. But what do we do as humans? We start up. This is not easy. So what do? We lower our standards. But here's the second point I'll make about that. Now we've lowered our standards and we're accepting where we are, even though we know how much better we feel when we're here. So what are we willing to give up to get to here? Is it time, money? Is it sleep? But think about it this way. So I'm tying it all back to this. When I'm sitting with clients, I ask them 2 questions. All right, I say, this is where you want to be. So I want to ask you a question. When you make a doctor's appointment, do you put that in your calendar? Well, yes. Do you miss that doctor's appointment? No. Why not? Because it's about your health. It's your health. You will not miss a doctor's appointment. Is fitness about your health? Is eating better about your health? Yes. Do you put that in your calendar? Do you miss those appointments? Because you just told me if you get from here to here, this is a 10. Why are we unwilling to put ourselves first when we put a high priority on our health by doctors, which technically most doctor visits are to give you something to control something that you can control yourself? Our mentality about a lot of things have shifted, Mike, and I think that's one of them, is we don't recognize the importance of taking care of ourselves, which can lead to red reactions because we're frustrated. It's not about being vain. I say to this, everybody is like, when you look in the mirror, I don't give a damn who you are. You want to like what you see back. And when you do, you have higher self-confidence. You have higher self-esteem. You feel better. You'll go to the parties because you like the way the dress looks on you or the outfit looks on you. You're social. Well, what's the flip side of that coin? If you don't like the way you look, you're depressed, you have low self esteem, you have low self awareness, you say no to all the invites, addictions form. So, tying all this back to this episode about good and bad, when you're here, there's a good chance you're a good human being. When you allow your standards to come to here, there's a chance that you're not. You can, it's just you're not being the best version of yourself. And when you're not, it leads to a lot of other bad things that can happen in your life. So just reframing our mindsets to put I guess what I'm saying is to tie back to working too much or getting out in nature is I think part of the solution, Mike, is to putting more value back into ourselves.
Totally agree. I think one of the things we talk about working out a lot because you and I agree that it's a gateway to a lot of great happiness in your life and great success. But I think getting out in nature and working out have two things in common with a third thing, which is physical labor. When you do things with your hands, when you are engaged in an activity where you build something or you create something, whether that be yourself, whether that be you're gonna go work on your car, or you're gonna go out in nature and observe the world around you in a way that gets fresh air in your lungs and challenges you on a hike or whatever. It creates peace within you as a human being. I don't know how. It's an observation. I don't have the science behind it. It's not an original observation. A lot of people have observed this. There probably are some studies, and I'm going to go look them up and see what I can learn from them. But I just believe, man, that working out, getting out in nature, doing things with your hands, whatever it might be, I don't care if you're an executive of a Fortune 500 company, you better be doing this stuff.
Yeah,
Every human being is better when you do these things. And if you're not doing those things, just as you said, the flip side of that is also true. You're not better, you're worse. And if you're worse, what's fueling how you're feeling? Probably a lot of things, but that's a great place to start. Great point.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. I've been reading a different book. It's called Alchemy. Um, Rory, somebody wrote it. I can't remember, but he talks a lot about um, the difference between logic and magic and how a lot of that's been lost because the world we live in now with all the technologies, there's a solution for every problem logically, but we've taken the magic out of the moments. We've taken the magic of how things happen. I just think that's amazing point of view, the way to look at the world now. Yeah, I can get on Chat GPT and find a damn solution for whatever my problem is. Hell, I can rebuild a carburetor in 10 minutes now. It's the amount of data and self-help videos that we have it's bizarre, but it takes something away from life, the magic moments. And I just think there's a lot to that. And it ties back to being able to go out and get fresh air in your lungs, getting 10 minutes of sunlight every day that will help you sleep better at night. It resets your circadian rhythm. All of the things that you can do personally, Mike, I think we talk about a ton. Tying this episode back to the F bombs, it all ties back. If you have a strong faith, you're typically going to be a responsible influencer. You're not going to get careless because you're grounded in what you believe, but you're not the person that's going to jam that belief down someone else's throat. Fitness, we just talked about all the benefits that can create and Mike, that's if I'm being honest, that's how I get out of the red. Like when I feel I will go for a walk. I'll go outside. I'll crank out a workout. And when I do, immediately in the green. So we know fitness and faith, and you talk about family, just like you and Michelle going to Alaska, dude. That's core memories. That's magic. Spending time, playing games, playing a board game with your child. Those are things that can help take you from you're in a bad mood, sit down with your child and play a board game with them. How the hell are you going to stay in a bad mood doing that? Eating popcorn and laughing. You're not. And then finances, that's tricky. That's tricky. If you're under a financial burden, that's a weight, man. That is a yoke around your neck. But are you better today than you were yesterday? That's the question. And if you're not, what can you do to get there? So tying it all back, there's Those are just our four words. There's a million different anecdotes that you could use, but those are just practical F bombs. That's how I see it, Mike. Any thoughts on that?
No, I think yes, my thoughts are yes, of course I have thoughts, but my thoughts follow yours perfectly. I don't have anything different thoughts than that. But I think Shane, I think we've been able to delineate all of the things that we see and where we're headed as a society and what scares us about that. I think we've been able to articulate, you know, some examples and thoughts about, what are some possible solutions. Let's try to wrap that up and give folks some solutions. Here's a couple of things I was thinking about. One is pull out the domino. When you're in the middle of you see this stuff moving the wrong direction, whether it be a post that you're about to repost, as you just said, or a whatever, take a second to pull a domino. What happens if you don't make that post? Nothing. You just stop the chain of events. You just stop the chain. So you might feel a certain way, but do you have all the facts? So number one is pull out the domino. Number two is do a better job of investigating truth. All of us, do a better job. Find out both sides of the story. If you see a quote from somebody, you might want to figure out whether or not that's the full story, or is there more around that quote that explains what the individual meant about it? Those are my two. And then the third one is be active. Be active in your health. Be active in your mental health. Get outside. Build something. Those are three that I can think of, Shane, from what we talked about. Any other thoughts for you on that?
No, I think you did a perfect summation there. Mine kind of were just tying back to the four F bombs earlier, but I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's a good mantra to leave with, to just pull the domino, man. Just I love that. I love that saying. I use it pretty much every client meeting that I have. I talk about the dominoes. And to your point, when you pull it, it gives you a chance to do what? To reframe. And when you reframe, what do you find? You find clarity. And those all have to tie together. They have to triangulate for you to be a responsible influencer. Those are the techniques, right? So I thought that was a good summary of what people should be able to do.
In the example of pulling a domino, you and I were having a discussion about an exchange that I had with another person over text on an opinion that they had, and at some point I was getting angrier. I was getting angrier because the individual was refusing to investigate. Not that they had a different opinion than I did. I don't care about that, but you don't have all the facts. I get frustrated because you're not willing to get the facts to have an opinion. And eventually I pulled the domino. I said, you know what, I'm going to stop this conversation because it's not sinking in. I'm just getting myself madder and it's not going to change the outcome. So I'll just say, okay, got it, and moved on. Um, it has to get resolved because the person that's important to me. But at the moment, that was not the time to try to. So anyway, just an example on how to pull the domino when you have the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Well, Shane, I think that wraps it up for this episode. It was a good one. It was fun just to be off the top of our minds about an open topic and, just share with each other and the audience what we thought.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, man. Good just to riff out some thoughts on our perspective of what's going on, which is our opinions. And you may or may not believe with much of anything we say, but we hope you do. We hope you get some value from these episodes because Mike and I truly do want to be responsible influencers and helpful instead of hurtful or confusing. That is never our mantra. We believe in the kindness to other theory and truly want to be a assistance and help to other people. So absolutely.
Totally agree. So if you're listening to this and you think we could help you, your teams, your workplace, whatever, in any of the things we're talking about, we'd love to kind of see it. So just look us up on our website, www.leadershipignitionteam.com. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're there. And thanks for following. Subscribe, like, leave a comment. Shane, you want to wrap it up?
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you guys joining us again for another episode of the Get Lit podcast. As always, you guys have a fantastic day, rest of your week. And as always, Mike,
Hey, everybody.
let's get let's get lit. See you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Ignition Team podcast. Go to our website at www.leadershipignitionteam.com to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, engage with us, and find again favorite podcast networks, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.